So our 3 o'clock hour is, we've got faith leaders coming up, archbishops and bishops, and so we're going to be hearing some ecumenical reflections and particularly looking at leadership. And so we're looking forward to that. But I also want to come back again to gratitude for all those who've participated so far today, but gratitude to the mayor for having this idea and convening us and bringing us together. And gratitude to the San Antonians who volunteered, for all the San Antonians to make today happen. But particularly the San Antonio Community Resource Directory, sacred.org, who is providing the tech capacity and movement today. It's a directory of resources from congregations to nonprofits to the government to groups in San Antonio that are trying to, and have been for quite a while now, years, pulling together all the resources that are in close proximity to where people need those services. Are also in need right now of volunteers to make sure that those services and what's in the directory are the most current and up to date. So if you want to be doing some volunteer work at home while you're at home, please let Sacred know at info@sacred.org. So this coming hour, again, our ecumenical leaders are denominational leaders that we find in town within the Christian tradition. And this time is going to be hosted by Reverend Dr. Don Martin, who also serves on the Religious Discrimination and Diversity Action Team. She's also the executive director at the Soul Center and is a board member to that sacred.org. I've been collecting one-liners of wisdom throughout the entire day. And I realized during this last session, they're kind of becoming a poem. Not that I'm a poet, but I have been collecting those and I've been reading those at the end of each time. Oh, by the way, in case Zoom dies, take a breath. Bill from Sacred will fix it and you can come back. But I'm going to share those one-liners in the poem that is developing. Our collective we is going to die and be reborn again. We're all in this together. We're all each other's relatives, people together, taking care. This power of reflection in pandemic viral air. Reflection informs our actions reveal our prayers, and prayer is reflection come round and back again. This is not social distancing. This is social connecting, relational fortitude, spiritual well-being. This is about us, not you, not me. What is the world we want to see? Do our parts. Tie your camel. Trust the rest. Speak, I love you. I'm here for you. One day we'll tell the stories. Plant what we've always wanted. Plant and replant again. Order out some happy, some shalom ringing true. The pieces come together. A balance comes as well. 5 times 5 times of prayer, 5 times 5 times of care. Help of self towards help of others. Life is not all just COVID-19. Patience, slow down, human being, listen. How we learn from others is by what they do, not just what they say. We learn this way, we teach this way, children grow this way. Dawn, it's all yours.
Thank you, Anne. It's a privilege to be here. And I'd just like to say kudos to Anne. I don't know if everyone's aware, but Anne has been helping to lead this conversation since 8 a.m. and we're now entering to 3 p.m. And so I'm so amazed by not only her spirit, but her energy and being the mobilizer, along with the mayor, of this conversation, and Wyndee and the other volunteers that came together for this moment. So Anne, thank you for this time. And thank you to our panelists. You saw the amazing group that Anne and others have brought together to talk about ecumenical reflections and leadership. I'd like to start out our conversation and give each member of the panel an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about your tradition and your role in your community, if you will. And I'm going to ask, if the panelists don't mind, because we have so many bishops and reverends, if I might be able to use your first name when talking to you. I hope everyone is okay with that. So why don't we start alphabetically with Most Reverend Gustavo Garcia Siller. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role and your tradition.
Well, I am Archbishop Gustavo, and I am the Archbishop here in the Archdiocese of San Antonio for the Catholic Church. Usually I preside at the cathedral, San Fernando Cathedral, that is a well-known place in the city of San Antonio. And I'm very, very pleased to be part of this panel in which we're going to help ourselves, each other, to build up faith and hope.
Thank you. And someone else would like to go, or we can go alphabetically. I think next is Reverend Susan J. Briner.
Thank you so much. So yeah, you can call me Sue. I'm currently serving as the Bishop of the Southwestern Texas Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And I have a territory that goes from north of Georgetown into the Hill Country, down to Victoria, Corpus Christi, and down to the border with Mexico. And I'm very pleased to be a part of this conversation today. I've been finding opportunities to reflect in all sorts of ways, locally, nationally, and even internationally, with some of my brothers and sisters in Christ overseas. And it's amazing what God does when we start talking with each other more. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And Right Reverend David Reed, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about you to get us started. Do we have Reverend David Reed?
He was here earlier.
I'm here. Okay, I'm trying.
It's all good. We're all new at this, so.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I'm on video or not, but probably better not to be for me.
Oh, you are.
Okay. There. That should do it.
Excellent. We see you and we hear you.
All right. Well, I need to apologize for my communication staff. This is not a reflection on them. They're trying really hard to bring me up to speed. I'm David Reed, and I am the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of West Texas, which covers not quite as much territory as Sue just described, but our diocese consists of 87 congregations spread across 60 South Texas counties, from Brownsville and Port Isabel out to Sonora. And I'm delighted that Anne and the mayor have thrown this together, and I'm glad to be with my brothers and sisters for this hour.
Thank you, David. And Bishop Robert Schnace.
Well, thank you. I'm Robert Schnaze, and I'm Bishop of the Rio Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church. I live here in San Antonio and work out of here. The Rio Texas Conference includes about 350 congregations that include Austin and San Antonio and Kerrville and San Angelo and Victoria and Corpus Christi, and then all things south to the border. We have about 450, 500 miles of border that's in our territory. And I just want to begin by expressing appreciation to Anne and to Mayor Nierenberg and to Dawn for hosting this, and I look forward to the conversation together.
Great, thank you, Robert. And the Reverend Dr. Sally Watson.
Hi, friends. I'm Sally Watson. I'm the General Presbyter for Mission Presbytery, which is the local region of the Presbyterian Church USA. In talking with my colleagues, it's interesting that I believe that our territory is almost exactly the same as the ELCA and the United Methodist. We, if you put a dot in the middle of Texas, they cut Texas into 5 pie pieces after that. And we cover the southern fifth of the pie from all the way at the border to north of Austin. We go west to Del Rio and Laredo, and we go east to Palacios and Collegeport. I have been doing this work, which is the Presbyterian equivalent of bishop work, 12 years now. And I have to say that my 4 years in San Antonio, I have never enjoyed such a good relationship with the city or with ecumenical colleagues. And I'm so grateful for that. I think this is one of the ways we're going to have best to go forward in such a time as this.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. Just listening to you, and Sally mentioned it as well, this broad expanse. We're coming from not only a geographic expanse, but even within the Christian tradition, a little bit of a theological expanse. And we have this opportunity to be together. I'm wondering if each of you might offer your sense of why this day of reflection, where we can gather from expanse into this community that is Zoom, why this day of reflection is important, not only for you, perhaps individually, but also for others in this particular moment that we find ourselves in. And I can call on someone, or you can just pop up, so whatever works best. I'm just gonna say Sue.
All right, we're all trying to be very polite.
I know.
So thank you, Dawn. So for me, I think this provides an opportunity to reflect on our common humanity and the ways in which we, as the church, are suffering together in solidarity with each other, and also for those or with those for whom being shut in or being without enough food or even toilet paper or being without work is a daily occurrence even before COVID-19. I think just the opportunity to recognize that the position of privilege that we've had or enjoyed, a lot of us, and how this crisis brings us more together with our most vulnerable brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Sue, for that reminder. Robert, would you like to offer?
Sure. So with the shelter in place, I think many people who, of course, are staying home are very much limiting their activities. It almost, to listen to that, sounds like an opportunity to get some rest and relax some. When in fact, whether it's talking to pastors or people in other types of work, they're working 2 and 3 times as hard to do the very same things that they were trying to do before this came upon us. And so I just think it's important, the more this presses upon us and the more we get stretched and the more we get confused about technology and the more we try new things that we haven't tried before, there's a stress that just comes with that. And it's good to back off every once in a while and simply stop and think and pray and talk with one another. And so that's why I appreciate this day of reflection. I'm also aware that just with technology in general anyway, there's a fluidity of time that has many people working, sending emails and texts, late at night and on weekends and that kind of thing. I see that since this, since the coronavirus crisis began, that's becoming even more fluid. And so people are basically doing the work that they would ordinarily do within some kinds of boundaries. They're doing it from sun up to sundown, and we can't. This is a marathon and not a sprint, and so we need reminders like this day of reflection to just kind of interrupt that sense of urgency and be able to get a little more perspective. So I appreciate this being put together.
Thank you, Robert, reminding us to breathe in this moment and not to allow the fluidity of time to drown us, which is a distinct possibility with regard to this. David, do you have any insights you would like to offer on what this day of reflection might mean?
Yeah, I think for me and for many, the stay at home order of course, has us zeroing in on our immediate concerns, our families, our close friends, our extended families, and for those of us on this part of the day, we have responsibilities that are fairly large, and it's a good reminder that none of us is in this by ourselves. That we are all dealing with the same crisis and the same concerns that I have for my clergy and congregations are shared by everybody else on this portion of the program. And I'm just glad for the reminder that none of us has to figure this out on our own. None of us has to pass through this time by ourselves.
And thank you. You were just pointing to this rapid adaptation that we're having to live within, knowing that we're not alone. And I would just like to say, as moments of grace, if any of our panelists need to break away, I can imagine that you're getting bombarded with emails and calls. Also feel free to do that as well. This is meant to be an opportunity for us to gather and to enliven and enrich one another and learn from one another. So just opening that possibility, if you do need to leave us, please know that we more than understand the demands that are on your time. Sally, I wonder if you would like to offer some insights.
It seems to me that when was it, 10 years ago that this thing started? The whole expanse of time has just really felt odd, and I feel like next month is a year from now, but whenever this started a few weeks ago, I felt myself gearing back up into what I would call Hurricane Harvey response. My first instinct was to contact every one of our 130 congregations and find out where they were and what they needed and who their people, all that stuff. And it's more than any one person can do. Fortunately, I have a wonderful staff of colleagues that are able to kind of help keep in touch and make some of that happen. But I felt that same instinct happen to me when I began to realize how serious this was going to be, and wanting to contact the churches and listening and taking calls from pastors who have diagnoses in their congregations. And the gift of this day is a moment to step back and even think theologically. What does our faith tradition have to tell us about this? What do our other colleagues, what can I learn from my colleagues here who I always learn from whenever we're together? But that's the main thing for me, is that it's so easy to get caught up in that ball of anxiety, and a time to pull back and reflect, I think is going to help me tomorrow and the next day and the next day as we try to move everybody forward.
Thank you, Sally, reminding us that it has only been a few weeks and not 10 years, though it does feel that we've been sloshing through this for a really long time at this very beginning. And Archbishop Gustavo, would you like to add something?
Okay. Yes. Yes. These difficult times leads us to the possibility of having a conversation regarding our faith, our trust, also to the awareness that all of us, we are vulnerable, and sometimes it's a part of us that we don't want easily people to share. So this day of reflection can help us to have a common ground regarding that, and how we can, through our faith in the different paths and possibilities, how we can carry this cross, this the cross that makes us aware that we are one with the world. So this is not just here in San Antonio or in the area or in the country, but in the world. And so a conversation of faith and trust can lead us to respond better to the specific situations that we face every day these days, and how people they come to our lives asking for something. They are expecting something, not necessarily of me as individual, but and the bottom line is they are expecting God to act. And sometimes God's actions are very clear and we enjoy them. But other times, like this, is difficult. And there are questions and people, they wonder what is happening, how to cope with that. So we are grateful to be able to share this moment.
Great, thank you. I know when I was pondering what this day of reflection might mean, it came to me that perhaps mindful of all the vulnerability and the suffering that is attending this as well, but being mindful that this time to collectively breathe together might open up a space where we can creatively and effectively rethink what it means to be community and how we do community. I wonder if you have some reflections with regard to if members of your different congregations or those who help facilitate the works of your organizations and the lives and spiritualities of those who are nurtured within your denominations, what might this day of reflection offer for others for rethinking community in your experience? Sally.
I think it's, I hope it will offer something. But as I have worked with our congregations this week, I'm struck again by the lack of electronic resources with a number of our congregations, but many of the members. And I think that if we only offer resources electronically, of course, we don't have a lot of choice right now. But if we only offer resources electronically, I think that we may be missing a number of folks in our faith traditions. And I'm just kind of thinking about what we could do about that.
Thank you, Sally, for mentioning that equity divide. I have a friend who works with regard to the equity divide in technology, and that's very palpably felt right now with regard to that. Thank you. Other thoughts and reflections on how we rethink, how we re-become a community in this moment? Yes, Sue, and then Gustavo.
Sorry. So one of the things that I've been so appreciative of is that congregations who have perhaps in the past felt themselves to be more of an island, even though they might be, 2 miles from their nearest neighbor, are beginning to connect with each other in new ways, whether that's online or even offering to make calls to each other's parishioners. And I'm also, I've been also pleased with the way in which some of our folks are taking seriously neighbor love and are actually doing things like going down the streets of their neighborhoods where they never met the people before. And they're leaving notes on their doors like, I'm going to the grocery store. If you need anything, here's my number. So I'm finding that people are all of a sudden paying much more attention to their neighbors than they have in the past, which is encouraging.
Thank you for sharing those vignettes. Gustavo, I you saw you had raised your hand. So it looks like I'm going to go with David. We have some technology blips.
Okay. Thank you. I think anytime that there's a crisis or disruption like this, although it's hard to compare this to anything else, there is a time to reassess what matters and to hopefully to turn again to those things that really matter in our lives and to miss the things that we normally take for granted. So that I do think that at least in our diocese, the churches are really missing, the people are really missing being able to come together on Sunday morning for worship. And so I hope that the yearning that they have now, that we all have now to be together, we're created for community, I think, that we'll remember and that we will re-engage more closely and more lovingly, not only in our churches, but outside our churches, doing the kinds of things that Sue mentioned, because I think there's the redemptive movement of God in all of this, and is that we learn and we grow and are transformed.
Thank you, David. And I noticed Gustavo is back. If you want
Yes.
to.
You know, I was thinking, listening to all of you, that about our school system or education field has been a tremendous expression of how communities could be formed in different ways. It could be through the online courses, but also in sharing in simple ways talents and gifts. So simplicity. You know, I have been in some celebrations, of course, not open to the public, but in prayer, and has been coming more and more to my mind, to my heart, how beauty is in simplicity. And so there are people, you know, the teachers, they already were gifted, but now we see how they are coming with such new expressions and little ways that, I mean, to entertain and to educate and to form the little ones in their homes is not that easy, but they become so creative and so simplicity. I believe that there is beauty and there is depth as we do simple things for people, and people appreciate them, you know. Like just yesterday, somebody just left outside my house a little bouquet of flowers. What a beautiful thing, you know. I mean, usually I'm in an office, I am trying to do other things, little things that bring us together, mindful and helpful.
Thank you for that call back to simplicity in a time that can feel overwhelmingly complex. Robert, did you want to add anything?
Sure. So many of our churches, yes, they long for one another's presence, of people within the congregation, but many of them are finding they're actually having almost deeper engagement with one another in this time because of the intentionality about phone calls and making connections, and they're actually having conversations and interweaving their lives with other folks within the congregation and their prayer lives in a way that that wasn't going on at the level of depth that it was before this crisis. But it has, in many congregations, deepened those kind of internal connections, strengthened the body of Christ as we encourage one another and as we realize how knit together we are. But also, it has strengthened in many places drawn more threads of connection to the communities in which these churches serve, because you know, it's an issue with many of our churches across denominations that they become very inward centered and they're just focused on the people within the walls. Well, we can't have people within the walls right now. So almost by the nature of this crisis, our ministry has to get beyond those walls and interweave with the community in some ways. And then as far as strengthening those connections, I think it also is reflected in the kind of exercise that we're going through today with leaders and in a variety of faith traditions, is we all, each one of our denominations, each one of our faith traditions has our unique kind of internal challenges that are, you know, what's on my plate is a little different from what's on your plate, but we've got major challenges in the United Methodist Church. But this kind of crisis breaks us out of this sense that what I'm dealing with is the most important thing. And I don't know how to say that. It's like I heard someone say one time. The notion of I'm glad the hole is in your end of the boat doesn't really help, because if there's a hole in the boat, we're all got to get to work to do something about it. And so this ecumenical and interfaith conversation today even represents that there's no sense that it's their problem or their problem or it's all of ours. We all own this.
Thank you, Robert. And when you said beyond the walls, that drew me back to something that Archbishop Gustavo had said about international. So I'm wondering, not just this day of reflection, but reflection as a practice, a theological practice, a spiritual practice. What do you think even more broadly? This is a global pandemic that we're immersed in at the moment. What resource can reflection provide for our broader communities in this moment, do you think? Sally, you nodded, so I'm gonna call on you.
I'm not sure I was nodding in a helpful way.
Okay.
I'm trying to think about that. One of the griefs that we've experienced is that our national denomination is calling our mission coworkers home. We're very close to a couple, Charles and Melissa Johnson, who have been serving in Zambia, and they have been moved back to Atlanta, and they are deeply grieving. Part of the reason they had to move back was healthcare issues for Charles himself, but they're worried as they can be about the community that they've left behind. And I think that probably feeling grief and some guilt about having, to be pulled back from that. So I've been thinking, how do we reach out to them? We have close ties with the Presbyterian Reformed Church in Cuba. We have been in dialogue with them through email and newsletter, but I still feel stymied as to what we can do there to help. So I think my nod was, I recognize the problem, and I wish that there were more that I felt that we could do about it. So friends, what ideas do you have?
Others?
This is David. I'm not sure I have ideas about what to do, but I do want to express my great appreciation to the Pope, followed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, in calling all Christians to pray the Lord's Prayer the other day together, and to be mindful. As Robert said, we're all in the same boat all over the world, and we, in our diocese, we have lots of mission partners in Mexico and Central America and in Africa, and we have great concerns. We've had to pull back people, teams that were going to be sent out are on hold, and we're very aware of brothers and sisters around the world that are in this same struggle with us, and looking for ways for how we can continue to support them with prayer and with finances through this time till we can be together again. Our mission partnerships are very relational, and being apart hurts. Obviously, it hurts all of us.
Thank you, David. Sue?
Oops, thank you. Well, and we also have international partners. For us, it's the Lutheran Church in Costa Rica, and so we had already been having regular Zoom meetings quarterly to kind of reflect with each other as partners. So that's been helpful to continue. But I think about, for all of us on this call, our closest international neighbors are right across the border from us, and my heart grieves for them particularly, and all of those that are waiting at the border. And we have, with our border, we have so much commerce that goes back and forth every day, that on both sides of the border, I see that this is going to be a crisis. And so I don't have an answer for that, but I just don't want us to forget, in the midst of all that we're going through, what's happening on our borders.
Thank you, Sue, for that call to remember the suffering that's going on. Yes, Gustavo.
I would like also to go in the same direction that that we have been talking regarding the expression of the Holy Father, Pope Francis. It was especially yesterday, in which it was a prayerful moment, and pretty much silence in one of the places which has been affected the most in the world, in Italy, and just in silence. Only God can help us to be for others and to build with others some kind of understanding or some time of affection these days, and silence that will allow suffering to be absorbed and to be embraced. As we just heard about the border, I was there just a few weeks ago, and with the people in Matamoros. On the other side, it's true, but we just heard they are suffering a lot, and also I remember here in our city the difficulty that the city is having with having for hope. Every day I have been going to the cathedral, and I see I don't see, of course, any small crowd at all, but I see many homeless, and it's not an answer, no, but I think silence, prayer, and the owning of the suffering of others can help us to connect better and to be more instruments of love, care, and some kind of understanding. So the yesterday celebration of the Holy Father, I was very moved, and just led me to see the sense of the world in this. The world is not just me, it's not just us, it's the whole world. And the Lord is still speaking to us even when it's hard to understand these days.
Thank you, Gustavo. Robert, did you want to?
Sure. You ask about how does this practice of a day of reflection, kind of what does that look like globally, to think of the global church. And that becomes harder to imagine in some ways, because I think when I think of neighbors here in San Antonio and kind of in the US, and even to an extent along the border, there are some very practical things that we can do. There are actions that we can step into as churches, as individuals, that can alleviate suffering, that can reach out and connect with people. The United Methodist Church is very strong in parts of Africa, and it's our fastest growing part of the United Methodist Church. And it feels incredibly distant, more distant than ever before right now. Knowing that the virus has not yet really, it just sparks but hasn't broken into a flame yet. And the conditions in Africa are such that there are many countries in which any notion of social distancing is just unimaginable, unachievable. And so if anything, thinking and reflecting more globally, that may be where I feel most helpless in the face of this, and not sure what to do. I would also add to, as far as those who are feeling the impact of this and some of the consequences of the reactions that some of our folks have had, I was speaking with one of my colleague bishops in United Methodist Church just yesterday, and in the area that he supervises, that he oversees, he has 30 South Korean pastors who pastor in predominantly Anglo communities, and the explicit expression of racism that they're experiencing when they go to the stores, when they're driving down the street, has caused most of those pastors to feel like their families are not as safe as they were just a month ago. And so this, a crisis like this brings to the surface some of the very best and deepest impulses, the highest impulses of the human spirit. It also feeds this fear, this xenophobia, this wanting to blame someone, scapegoat. And I think we've just all got to be so keenly aware of that in this time.
Thank you for those words. And I'm wondering if we might dwell for a moment on a theme that was brought up by a few of you, and that is grief and mourning. There are a lot of theologians who have talked about how if we become trapped in despair, there's a sense of powerlessness and mourning. And so how do we provide our communities with public expressions? A lot of times the laments are an excellent example of that. And that the laments can move us from a place of despair to one of solidarity. But I'm wondering, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I'm kind of, I think, coming at this a little bit differently than what we might have anticipated our conversation. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how we provide public expressions, especially when we are beyond the walls of our communities, beyond the church space in this particular time, because there's a lot of loss and grieving that's going on. How can we help folks process that, live with that, but also not become mired in that so that it becomes a destructive element? That might have been a way too difficult question to throw at you. Yes, Lacey, David, thank you.
I'll give it a try. I think, first of all, I need to acknowledge and face into my own grief and my own sense of loss. This is a time of grief. I'm sure I'm not alone in having had lots of plans for the churches that I oversee this year. Lots of things, exciting things as the Spirit moves among us, and many things are called to a halt. Everything, not everything, I should retract that, but many things are different, and we've had to stop and refocus and adjust and make allowances. And so but not just in my work and in my ministry, but certainly personally, things that I had looked forward to being part of are now stopped. And so in order for us as servants and leaders to talk about grief and grieving in healthy ways and helping individuals and communities craft ways of grieving that may be different than what we've done before, I need to sit with myself for a while and deal with that. And when we were early into this, I joke, not really joking with clergy, but one of the common complaints of clergy is we don't have enough time to read and study and reflect. And I told our clergy, now we do. But as somebody mentioned, Robert, I think that we're at least as busy as we were before. And so I think many people, not just us, but many people are carrying large burdens and not having the time or the luxury to be still and to face what they're experiencing within. So having done that, I'll now throw it to everybody else to figure out what to do.
Thank you, Dave. Sally.
I agree with David. I think that one of the most important ministries that we can offer is our own authenticity. Not so much that, I'm bleeding all over the carpet and y'all have to minister to me, but a truthfulness, and this is hard for me. This is scary for me. One of the things that I'm dealing with right now, actually, I have a sister in the Dallas area who is dying of stage 4 colon cancer, and I can't go see her. I'm able to stay in touch with her on the phone. We talked this morning, but excuse me, that's been difficult for me. And I think my sharing that with certain people in an appropriate way, not in an oversharing kind of way, but in saying, here are some of the struggles that I'm having. I hope that will encourage others to have the freedom to say, yes, I'm struggling here too. If we come across as too Pollyanna or if we come across as we're all going to be fine, this is going to be great, we will come across as inauthentic. And I think that we also will not give permission to others to speak and share their fears. I think as we are able to share our authenticity and our vulnerability, that puts us in a better place to share the resources of the faith with others also.
Thank you, Sally, for that shared vulnerability there. Sue.
Thank you. Well, yeah, like you, I have a father in hospice just in the area, close enough to be able to drive to. I can't see him. So we had a Zoom meeting with the family for his 87th birthday yesterday. And to even just post those kinds of things on Facebook so people recognize, yeah, we're all in this together. I think for me too, naming it as I talk to people has been helpful, and to name that it isn't just one kind of grief, and we're kind of in all the stages of grief at the same time. You know, we alternate between denial on one thing, like, oh, I'm not going to have to cancel my Synod Assembly in June. Oh, wait, yes, I am. And then I get into anger and shock and all of those things at once. And I think to be able to help people recognize that those emotions are natural and they're okay. And pastors especially, who are so good at walking others through grief, but then not necessarily themselves, just like we're not always necessarily ourselves so good at it. So when we have weekly check-ins with our pastors, we've been taking some time just to share where we're at and how we're feeling, and to just let people unburden one another. And that's been tremendously helpful, as we've also been doing with fellow bishops on Zoom. There, David, I was smiling when you were talking about technology. Bishops who have said they would never use electronic technology like this are fully now embracing it. And so it gives us an opportunity to be able to share our own feelings about things.
Robert, I thought it looks like you had like to add.
Yes, thank you for bringing up the issue of grief and mourning and lamentation. Just in the last few days, I was on a Zoom call that had 21 laity and clergy from various churches in our conference. And it was a meeting that had a particular task. And so we opened with prayer, and it was a fairly typical opening prayer, but also aimed to lift up the virus. And what then happened is we actually finished a little bit earlier than we thought we were going to. And so we decided to just stop for another moment of prayer and to ask people if there are individual names or special concerns that they'd like lifted up. And we didn't name coronavirus as the topic, but I was completely overwhelmed in that 21 people, how this upward trending graph has turned into names and turned into real people. And that it just in the relationship circles of 21 people, how many had parents, sisters, brothers, nieces, nephew, who were at some stage with the virus. How many, named, of course, vulnerable parents. How many had relatives, sons, brothers, sisters, who were working in the front lines of the medical profession, including some in very vulnerable situations, serving as the kind of the medical personnel for public jails. And just in this one little group of 21 people, just how much there was that has been affected by this in just deep and profound ways. The anxiety over loved ones, the illness, the lost jobs, the at-risk people at risk. And so what started as just a few moments of prayer ended up maybe being the most significant time that we had together on the phone. It accomplished, maybe we did what we needed to do in that closing more so than we did in any of our conversations about the business that was at hand.
Thank you so much, all of you, for working through. Oh, and I see Gustavo, yes.
You know, yeah, the grief is very obvious, and as we just heard, there are many things and situations who are showing that it's not just the coronavirus, which now is a common element, but reality. But there are so many situations, and we are with all of you, particularly Sue, with the situation of your family, and I mean that must be very painful. We had one of the few people who have died here in San Antonio was a member of our community, and I saw how the pastor and the priest and the people in that community and the school, how they went into a very different picture, and very sad and very painful for them, and the uncertainty, who else has it, etc. But also I have seen some like little seeds of hope in some celebrations, a level of family, or a level of somebody said, with neighbors, even notes or something that can lead us to see what we are expecting after the storm passes. And these last few days, every day I have been ordaining one priest at the cathedral. Of course, they can invite only 4 people, members of their families. But because of the social media, is something that in the church people celebrate. And so to hear the comments, to see how many people are connected, you say, you know, we have to provide also for those seeds of hope that in the future we're going to see bursting. You know, at this time we enjoy them and we contemplate them, and we just let them help us to take the next step. So a day at a time, and really has been a real Lent, and to go into the desert. But the Lord is with us, and He will never abandon us. And that's our hope. And we see it in one another, in the expressions of care and love in other people around us.
Thank you, Gustavo, for your words. And that leads us so nicely into our next question that I'd like for us to think about together. And I'm wondering if you would share with us words of wisdoms, or ritual acts, or daily patterns or routines that provide for you groundedness in this moment, or that you know of that are practiced in your community, words that are spoken, acts that are done that can really help us focus and stay grounded in our faith, in our tradition. Anyone want to jump in there?
I'm good.
Yes, thank you, Robert.
All right. So when you talk about our tradition, I'm going to make this a Methodist thing for just a moment now and go back to our roots in John Wesley. John Wesley had what he called the general rules that helped form some of the ethos and identity of the Methodist Church in the 18th century. And the first of those is do no harm. The second is do good. And the third is sometimes abbreviated to and stay in love with God. And the do no harm, that's not a bad guiding principle in just how we approach so much right now. Do I really need to go to the grocery store right now and risk putting other people and face the possibility of putting other people at risk for a disease that I don't know that I have yet? Do no harm means take seriously the sheltering in place, take seriously what our leaders are telling us and CDC is saying about social distancing. Do no harm, and then do good means just, double down on those little acts of kindness as well as the big acts of generosity. To not, every time we refrain from shaking someone's hand, somehow fill that, that void, that action we used to take with something else that is as deep or deeper in terms of forming relationships. And then the stay in love of God for us means the sacraments. It means scripture. It means personal devotional life. It means prayer. It means service. And so out of our own Methodist faith heritage, that's just a very practical and simple, we call it the 3 simple rules that we're reminding one another of during this time.
Thank you, Robert, so much. Sally.
I find that I am praying more than I have in a long time. And I can't say that I'm doing so in any disciplined way. I do my share of reading. I don't really have a set devotional pattern that I follow, but I find that it's more spontaneous, that it's more while I'm watching the news or while I am meeting with one of our groups of pastors. Calling those pastors by name and praying for them and their congregations. It just almost, I don't want to say it's a constant state, but I'll say that it's more than I have prayed in a long time, and in more, I would say more organic and not exactly formal.
Thank you, Sally. Anyone else want to offer? Yes, Archbishop. Oh, you want to unmute?
In our Catholic tradition, we have prayer as a family or individually, the rosary, which are the different pieces of the life of Christ, that we meditate, and we do it with Mary, as she was saying yes to the plan of God. So that is a very simple prayer. We repeat it over and over again. But also we have the, some verses of scripture that could be very, very insightful these days, not only at the level of the mind, but the level of the heart, that they will warm the heart, that they are like verses from the Psalms. The Psalms, they speak about lamentation, about gratitude, and then adoration. So in many of our churches, we expose the Blessed Sacrament, and people can, through the social media, to be connected to that moment in their own homes or in their own places. And discernment, that's the other piece that I think that goes a little bit along with what Robert was saying, almost common sense and discernment. Sometimes we want people to tell us what to do, but we have the ability to discern, and we can make choices, little ones, and use of common sense. And the final that I would like to share is the loving attention to God. That means just to be in constant kind of love for Him and for others. That's loving God, loving others, but just, and sometimes when we say, "Oh, I love you," I'm thinking of you. All those kind of sentiments can be expressed to God and to others all day long, and even at night.
Thank you. David, I saw that you wanted to add some thoughts.
Yeah, I would say that one of the most powerful and life-giving resources that our church has at this time is our Book of Common Prayer, which has its roots in the Church of England and then back through that to the Benedictine practices, and beyond that to the synagogue worship of Jesus's day. And it's a way of cultivating habits of prayer that I see more and more of people, clergy and laity, turning to in this time. And so many of our churches are offering morning prayer, evening prayer, compline, the late night prayers of the monasteries. and doing that in a lot of creative and beautiful ways, and households that are worshiping, and returning to some really basic, tried and true practices for staying connected to one another and to God, and to be reminded of the unity that we share in Christ across time and space.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let folks know, our panelists and also viewers, that we are going to now turn the chat option on. And so if you have some questions that you would like to have us pose to the panelists, now is a great time to engage in an interactive component. You have amazing resources here in these folks. They bring experience and heart and their minds to these possible questions. I don't see any questions just right now. So I think what I'd love to move to is a question of, what is your hopeful vision for those you serve and lead at this moment? What's a hopeful vision? Sue.
I would say for me that it is that God is going to work in, and already is working in and through this pandemic to reach what we know of today as church. And I believe we're going to look radically different when we're done with this. And I'm hoping, as one from the Lutheran tradition, that this leads to a reformation, another reformation in the church, that we become more deeper spiritually, as well as much more connected to our neighbors.
Thank you, Sue. Other thoughts? Sally?
I would agree. I have been an acolyte for a long time of Phyllis Tickle, who wrote the book The Great Reformation. I've been talking about this over with some of my colleagues this week, and she says that the church goes through every 500-year kind of garage sale and keep some things and throw some things out, and but the point that I think she makes is that what is left, what was there before, doesn't go away. It, in my word, rejiggers. Okay. We had quite the debate about, she said that this current one that we're in started with Rauschenbusch in 1917, and that puts us about 100 years through the cycle. And so I'm like, okay, we have 50 more. Diana Butler Bass says that we had a reset of this current garage sale in 1963 with Vatican II. And so that gives us about another 100 years. And frankly, what we're going through right now feels like a reset to me. And we were all saying, wait a minute, it's not time. We can't do a reset yet. This isn't time. We have another 50 years, and not on my watch, we're going to do a reset. And maybe it is, maybe I have to deal with the fact that Phyllis Tickle could be wrong. I'm going to have a hard time with that. But I think that she is right about what was there before is going to rejigger itself. It's going to look differently. I have no idea what that's going to look like. But one of the things that I try to do with my people is I keep trying to point to that. Or as Chip and Dan Heath say in their book, Switch, I want to send postcards for the future. Here's where we're going. Here's where it's going to look like when we get done, to give some hope to get through. But I think, frankly, we're in the middle of something right now. You're right, Sue. It's not going to look the same when we get through it.
Any other thoughts? I know in the theological tradition that I have been educated in, there's this sense that hope has a now and a not yet component to it, right? That the kingdom is here and not yet. And so I'm wondering, are there ways, we've already mentioned some of these, but if we can be maybe even more specific, or think of something that pops into your head about the breaking in of the kingdom in this moment, or how the kingdom might be calling us. Like I said, we've talked on this a little bit, but I just thought that might stir a little bit more thought or reflection on kind of this now and not yet, this tension that we're living in that can be creative and also can feel very unsettling and uncertain. Thoughts on that? I can't see everybody, so I'm just all right. Thank you, David.
Sure, I'm trying to help you out. I would say, as followers of Jesus, we're always living in an in-between time between what is to come and where we are presently. And so The importance of remembrance in that life can't be overstated. We remember not so that we'll be nostalgic, but so that we will look with anticipation for the ways that God is moving and present and transforming and redeeming presently, as we anticipate the fulfillment of all of that in Christ in the future. And so we live by hope, by having our lives sort of, or not sort of, but our lives oriented that way and our wills bent that direction, so that whenever we pray the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, that all that we are is being shaped in that direction. So that our hope is ever before us, that Easter wins, that resurrection happens, and whatever the circumstances of the present moment, people have been in similar circumstances before, and we're not in this alone, and that this time too shall be redeemed in the fullness of time. So that would be I guess my hopeful message would be that love abides, and love prevails, love heals, and Easter wins.
Thank you. Yes, abiding in those sacraments and in the promises, the resurrection promises.
We do have some comments and questions.
I'm gonna
So
let you take that, Anne.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'll let you take that.
So comment. Thank you all for the conversation. While listening, I was reminded that our daily work is a sacrament. This is not often thought of consciously. While some work can and will be done from home, blurring the lines between the two undoubtedly adds to the angst. Perhaps naming this may help others better understand and deal with this part of their dis-ease. So there's that comment. Here's a question. Is this the first time all of you have been together? If so, how does that potentially shape future relationships and work? I'd add, if it's not the first time, the question's still the same.
This is not the first time we've all been together. I can think of a number of occasions that have drawn us together. Most recently, the installation for Bishop Sue and for Bishop Robert. And I remember also we took part in the 300th anniversary of the city of San Antonio together. Many of us did. I feel that we have already the formation of a strong relationship, and I hope and pray that it will continue.
Anyone else? I'll read another question. Do you have any stories about how some of your individual congregations have been adjusting? So a story.
I'll make it quick. It's a real good one. Our church in New Braunfels is putting together what they are calling Holy Week bags. And they are either going to mail or deliver them to every household in the church, not to the children only, but to every household in the church. And in that bag, it's reminders for the whole week of Holy Week. There's a palm branch for Palm Sunday. For Maundy Thursday, there's going to be a box of grape juice and some matzah bread. For Good Friday, there's a little piece of black cloth that can be put over the table or whatever is set up at home. And then Easter eggs for Sunday. It's pretty simple, but it's a way that there can be some, it can encourage, I think, some home worship and some home reflection.
Thank you, Sally. Others? Stories, snapshots? Yes.
Yes, another experience in the church has been in the communities is that parents have become more involved in the formation, the spiritual formation of their children, not just to bring them to church, but now themselves to be more directly engaged. And so that is a very powerful thing, because in the previous question about how the work at home has become, it becomes like a sacramental, it becomes an instrument of God's presence. Well, also in this spiritual formation, the parents, they become more directly involved in that domestic church. So there has been also good practice and adjustment in all our parishes.
Any more stories sort of on the ground? Sue, thank you.
Yeah, what you said, Archbishop, was so true, and I'm excited about that in our own Lutheran homes as well, because parents as primary teachers of the faith, we're equipping them to do that. The other thing I'm finding is people are, congregations are setting up care connecting teams that are looking in on one another by phone, by email, by letters, in ways that they have not done before. So I do think, as someone mentioned earlier, in some ways we're becoming more connected than we have in the past.
Thank you. Yes, David.
Yeah, one of our clergy shared a story with me a couple of days ago about his people that he's gathering via live stream for morning prayer on Sunday, and how one family, extended family out on a ranch, at the start of the live stream service, the children processed in behind a processional cross. One of the little children who serves as an acolyte carried the cross, and so they all marched in singing a hymn. And I think it's an illustration of how people are remembering that they're the church, whether they're in the building or not. And I think that's a really valuable and important lesson for all of us right now, that we are the church, whether we're in the building or not.
Thank you so much. We have maybe time for one more comment, one last word, or an image or a thought that we might like to leave the folks that are joining us from different media with.
Easter.
I would just say that I've been humbled and gratified by how pastors and lay leaders of congregations are finding new ways to do God's work with courage and with creativity. And this has pushed many of our churches out of a complacency, even as they were involved with Lenten services and leading up to Holy Week and Easter. This has caused people to have to rethink the meaning of almost everything they do, and it's deepened a sense of intentionality about it. So I've been amazed at the adaptiveness of the churches, how quickly they started figuring things out about how to form prayer trees or other ways of connecting with people, how they moved to online live stream and those kinds of things, and how pleasantly surprised many of them were to see how it connected. I know this isn't universal across all 350 of our congregations, but a significant number of our congregations are having more participation online than they would have had during those same weekends in person. And they're kind of trying to figure out how that works and what did we learn from this. So just that deep appreciation to all those who are working so diligently to multiply the witness of Christ during these times, and then also the things that they're doing to support those who are on the front lines of working with this virus, the medical professionals, and all those who offer those support systems.
Robert, thank you. Those are meaningful words to end our time together. Thank you for the sharing of stories, the sharing of insights, and especially from your perspectives of leadership and how leadership is being transformed in this very moment. So thank you for spending this afternoon with us, everyone. We appreciate it.
And I want to thank you all. You just all, like, when the call went out there, you all just went, count me in. I'm in. I'm in. And such a great symbol and sign of your commitment and your leadership. So I'm grateful. I do want to share with you an idea that I heard this week, that we don't why not just start ringing the church bell, all the bells, every Sunday? Because every Sunday is a day of the resurrection. So we don't have to wait till Easter to tell people that it's happening. So I leave that idea with all of you. And again, thank you for joining us and honoring us today. So